welcome to this week's video. Now this week's video is going to be a concert review. Now the last video I did on a concert, well, it's a bit awkward because I wasn't rude about the support band. It was Albert Lee I went to see, and the support band, I just mentioned that one of the guitarists was kind of moaning about the sound and stuff. And then unfortunately a few weeks ago I was doing a gig myself, and one of the members of that band came up to me and went, "Did you go to the Albert Lee gig? You reviewed us." Anyway, he wasn't annoyed with me, but I did think, note to self, I might meet the people that I'm talking about in these videos. So the question is, am I going to hold back on this video with what I think? Well, I think I'm going to be honest, but you'll just have to watch the rest of it and wait and see. So the gig I went to see, it was David Gray, and he was playing at the Portsmouth Guildhall. Although the night after that he was playing at the Brighton Dome, which is actually much closer to me, but that was a Friday night and I had a gig. So I went to Portsmouth, which was quite a bit further away, but I have to say the Portsmouth Guildhall is a fantastic venue, and you can park in a multi-storey car park right outside. You can get your ticket validated inside, so you can get out without having to queue. I know I sound like a real nerd when it comes to parking, but when you've been a professional musician as long as I have, parking is right up there with the, you know, what you're going to get to eat on the gig, etc, etc. But parking, you know, if I can get a parking space right outside the gig, that makes the gig for me. Now I have to confess, this gig is not really the typical kind of gig that I would go and see, but the reason I did, when I got my first recording bit of kit, it was one of these. It was a Boss BR1180, and it was a first sort of digital recorder. I'd always wanted a 4-track when I was growing up, but I could never afford one, and I used to borrow one from my friends or borrow one from the school, and then kind of write. And I always wished I could have a multi-track recorder, so when they became a bit more affordable and digital with this hard disk in, I got myself one. And it was around the same time that David Gray's White Ladder album kind of broke through, and he was doing that kind of production-y stuff with the acoustic guitar, which really appealed to me at that point. So I listened to his albums a lot, as much for the songs and the production, and I really liked it. So that's why I thought, I'm going to go and see David Gray. Now I have to confess, since those days I haven't really listened much to David Gray. I still play Babylon in my set all the time, which I think is a great song, but I haven't really kept up with his material. I did see a documentary a few years ago where he seemed to be doing this kind of real stripped back folky stuff, which didn't really appeal to me. But I did listen to the new album in the car on the way over to the gig, and I have to say I really thought it was good. Particularly lyrically, he's such a good lyricist that it sort of, some of the things stuck in my head, and then when he played them later on I remembered them immediately. He's a great lyricist. I'm just going to butt in here and just mention that I've got a library of video guitar lessons online. Beginning country guitar one, the newest one I've put up there is all about doing left hand damping, but I've got lots of other solos. I've got show you how to play the end solo from Sultans of Swing, a solo from Hotel California. I've got some Nile Rodgers funk stuff, various other stuff. There's some monthly subscriptions or some of the lessons you can buy separately, so go and check them out. They're on my website, iamtjwalker.com, and at the top of the page there's a little tab that says guitar lessons. Now I was later to get into the gig than I would have liked. As per usual, I'm dropping my kids off at their various clubs and classes they do after school, so I got there halfway through the support act's set. I'm going to talk about her more later. Now I was slightly surprised at the demographic of the audience at this gig. Most of the gigs I go to these days, like the last ones I went to Paul McCartney, Eagles, James Taylor. I like music that people older than me tend to like. It's music that was popular before my kind of era. So I'm quite used to being one of the younger members of the audience, but I thought I'd probably be somewhere more in the middle at this gig, and I probably was, more so than those other artists I previously mentioned. But I have to say the audience was older than I was expecting. There was quite a broad range, but I certainly didn't feel like I was one of the younger members of the audience, or that there were a lot of people younger than me there, so it did surprise me. Now I only mention the demographic and the age of the audience because it interests me as a musician trying to put gigs on as to who are the people that do come and see live music. And you know, there's a difference between music fans and people who just go and see someone because they remember them being in the charts. And there was that element there because there was some guy shouted out, "Play Babylon," after about one song, which must be very irritating for David. But anyway, apart from that, there did seem to be lots of hardcore fans there. So I found my seat, which I made a complete mess of. I walked through about 3 different doors trying to find it. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was in seat 1 in the row I was on, so I was right up against the wall, but for some reason I thought, oh, I didn't realise I'd be right there, and I had to ask about 5 people to move out my way or stand up and let me get past. So I made a bit of an idiot of myself trying to find my seat. Anyway, I found my seat, sat down, and then David and his band came on. Now the first thing I'm going to have to mention, I can't not mention this, is David's trousers. Now it seems, without irony, he was wearing the most massive pair of white trousers I've ever seen. Like possibly as big as you could get without them kind of impairing your movement in some way. It kind of reminded me of that photo of Harry Styles where he looked like he'd raided his nan's wardrobe. But was he's much younger and trendier than David. David's older than me. And he didn't mention the trousers or anything, so he seemed to be wearing them quite seriously. Anyway, I'll say no more about them. So once I'd got over the trousers, I noticed there were 5 other musicians on stage with him. They started off, I think there were 2 guys on keyboards, then there was a guy on electric guitar, someone on bass guitar, and then Clune on drums, who was kind of, he was on those older albums. I think there was a gap in the middle when he didn't play with David Gray, but he's kind of quite instrumental to that sound. He's got a very distinctive drumming sound, mainly on brushes, which kind of gives it that sound. So he was on drums. Now I don't really know who they were because David didn't really introduce them. I think he did introduce them by first name right at the very end, so I don't know who they are. I only know who Clune is because he was on the original albums and I remember reading about him a long time ago. Anyway, more about them later. Now my first impressions as they started were it was a really good sound. It was very clear. And it wasn't very loud. Now, I always stick my earplugs in almost straight away. I did at the Eagles, I did at Paul McCartney, and it wasn't particularly loud. It's partly because I wear ear protection all the time while I'm playing. And actually, I've got to the point where if I'm in a room with anything that's too loud, I find it uncomfortable just because I'm not used to it. It's like if you're used to wearing sunglasses and you go outside without them, you're kind of, even though you're perfectly capable of dealing with that light, and I'm perfectly capable of dealing with that sound. I'm so used to protecting my hearing that I put them in, and actually sometimes it improves the sound. But I didn't put them in straight away because it was so such a reasonable level. But after 3 or 4 songs I did put them in because I could feel my ears slightly starting to distort, so I didn't really want that. So yeah, it was a great sound, and David is a great singer. He's got an amazing voice and his vocal performance was flawless. His pitch is perfect. Really good, really impressed with that. Now let's get a bit nerdy here, you know, as this is really a guitar-based channel, I suppose. So I'm going to have to talk about David's guitar. Now, he's playing an acoustic guitar. Now, I think, and I was quite a way back, I was in the sort of raised stalls bit at the back, that he had his acoustic guitar plugged through what looked to me, from where I was, I should have taken some binoculars, schoolboy era, a Music Man combo, which he had it going into with some kind of chorus and stuff on. He didn't use that sound the whole time, but he used it to sort of mix up the sound of his guitar, which I thought was quite interesting. I also really liked the stage set. It was quite simple. There was sort of 6 long sheets of fabric coming down at the back, right from really high up all the way down, and at first they kind of looked like crumpled sheets, like white crumpled sheets, and in front of them these, I can't remember how many there were, these big round lights with like 7 bulbs in. And both of them sort of switched around, the big sheet switched around to being what looked like massive great long strips of aluminium foil that were kind of semi-reflective, and then the lights spun round to have mirrors on the back so you could sort of kind of see from behind the band with these kind of lighting effects. It was really classy, pretty simple but really cool, and some nice lighting going along with it too. And he did some songs off the new album, and he revisited older albums and did, you know, maybe a few in a section, and he kind of peppered the set with some of the big hits to keep people interested, you know, like the bloke who shouted out Babylon. He sort of spaced them out through the set, which was good to keep that element of the audience happy, I suppose. Now, as I said, this isn't usually the kind of gig I go to, because although I like really good songwriting and good singing, which I've got all of that, I also like some sort of good musicianship. Being a musician, I appreciate that, and I suppose the closest to this type of gig, singer-songwritery type of gig I've been to recently was James Taylor, and that's a very different thing because the musicianship in that band is absolutely phenomenal. You know, you've got Steve Gadd, you know, it's the world's best musicians all playing very sympathetically to the songs, and there's not any much musical showing off, but it's still brilliantly played. Now with David's band, it wasn't so much that. They were very much playing for the song. There's a couple of electric guitar bits with some sort of weird electric guitar tones, and one that David was strumming an electric guitar himself with a very sort of clangy sound. Not my kind of thing at all, but, you know, served the song. And the first thing, the drums, Clune on the drums. And it's great when it starts off, he's got that really distinct sound. He uses brushes most of the time, and it's got that kind of very busy kind of rhythmic sound, which is great. I have to say, it did start to get a bit irritating after a while, and it kind of longed for a kind of simpler Steve Gadd type groove, you know, but it was, that's what it is, that's what the sound is. But what I did find a bit weird is there always seemed to be one member of the band too many. Now I'm going to show you some of this footage while I'm talking about it, and it was mainly the sort of tall guy with the white hair at the back. They all swapped instruments. They all seemed to... 3 of them played bass at some point, I think. They all played a bit of guitar. Some of them played keyboards. But the guy at the back, he sometimes didn't seem to have anything to do, and he'd just be sort of standing there, as you can see in some of these clips, which is a bit peculiar. And they seem to swap instruments after virtually every song, which I thought was logistically a bit of a pain in the neck. But it didn't sound any different, whoever was playing whichever instrument. I mean, I could kind of see the point of doing it if you've got like a guitarist who, when he plays the bass, it gives it a weird sound because he's doing loads of lead stuff. But it didn't. It kind of sounded the same. At one point, 2 of them were playing bass, which that was kind of a bit different because one of them was playing high up and the other one was playing the bass lines. But it did seem, I'm not quite sure why they did that, because it didn't, for me, really particularly add anything apart from me going, oh, who's on that now? Now going back to the support act, Talia Ray, her name is, and she got up and she sung with David. She's on definitely one of the songs on the album, and she did 2 songs. The first one she sounded good on them. The second song she didn't seem to know as well as the first one. I'm not sure if that one was on the album. The first one was definitely, because I listened to it on the way over. Now she had someone else accompanying her, sort of switching between piano and guitar, and she did that sort of classic move of then sending them off and doing a song accompanying herself on piano, almost like I can play piano too. It was a bit like that. She also had that kind of in-between song patter. Here's one I wrote called blah, blah, blah. And I'd say the songs, although, you know, they seem to be quite good songs, completely forgettable immediately. And her voice, I have to say, was a bit shrill. She sung perfectly in tune, you know, very good singer, just not to my taste. She also did one cover version, which seemed to me a very strange choice. She did Purple Rain, and she didn't really do anything with it. She played it the same tempo, did all the same vocal bits as Prince did, but just accompanied by a piano. But the audience went mad for it. I don't know if it was out of relief of doing one that they knew. But anyway, it did seem a very strange choice of covers, because it didn't really seem to fit with their other stuff either. But she did do one sort of extended bit of in-between song patter, where she was talking about how she got the gig with David, and I couldn't really see from where I was. I hadn't looked her up beforehand. I thought she may be in her 30s from the way she was dressed from further back, and I thought, well, maybe, you know, she's been trying to make it for years, you know, struggling musician, finally got a big break when she met David, and she was telling the story about how she, although she was English, she happened to be in New York about to start a road trip with her dad and brother, which immediately makes you think, doesn't sound like a struggling musician. He was about to spend a month just driving across America in their own time. Anyway, I looked her up afterwards. It turned out she was 18, so it kind of all made sense after that. Now, the only other thing I'm going to mention before I get back onto the positives, because I did enjoy the gig, was David's dad dancing. I'm going to show you some of this. It was kind of exacerbated by the white trousers. Anyway, I'm not going to say any more about that. Now, I'm really glad I went. As I said, David's a great lyricist and he's written some great tunes. I like the new material, and I think the songwriting seems more mature in the later stuff. It's funny, I never noticed this when I was younger, but listening to some of the younger stuff, I could almost, you know, you see those engines and you know, they've replaced the side panel with a bit of perspex so you can see the cogs and how it works. It was almost with some of his earlier songs, I could almost see the musical cogs of how they were working. Not the lyrics, this was just musically. It's like, you could almost hear, oh, I've just played that chord. Oh, that's a bit weird, I'll stick that one in. Some of his early stuff sounds like that, but he's written some great songs that, you know, some of them are a soundtrack to people of my generation's life, you know, things like This Year's Love. One of the particular highlights, actually, he did a sort of long extended bit of speaking about his dad and how his dad had died when he was, you know, at the peak of his career, and his sort of great story about this party he had. And he's a very sort of personable, very likeable character on stage. Actually, that was one of the highlights, although, you know, musically it was brilliant as well. I really enjoyed his little bitty, you know, sort of tribute to his dad. Musically, one of the highlights was a song that I hadn't forgotten about it, but I don't think it was one of his bigger hits, but actually it's a real anthem, and I can imagine it's kind of up there with some real sing-along ones, almost like Wonderwall or something like that, but I don't know if it's ever really got that big, called Be Mine. And it was quite a relief, because it doesn't have that kind of drumming. It's much more of a kind of check it out if you don't know that one. I think it's a brilliant song, and as soon as he plays, like, oh yeah, I remember this one. I love this one. That for me was musically one of the high points, along with obviously Babylon, which I've played for years. I love that song. So I think this tour that he's doing carries on through the year. He's been in America, and he's going to carry on in the UK and Europe, I think. So I would say go and check it out. I really enjoyed it. You know, I've warned you about the trousers now, so you won't have the same shock that I had. But yeah, great songs, great singing. It was a great sound in the venue that I went to. The band play exactly appropriately for what you want. If you want to see a load of long guitar solos, don't go, because there aren't any guitar solos. But that's not why you go to this gig, is it? You go for the great song. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment. Let me know if you went to see David. Let me know if you agree with me. Or disagree with me even. I always like to get a good comment. I bring out new videos 7 PM UK time every Friday, so I hope to see you next week.